The doctrine of possible worlds can help improve our understanding of dozens of important philosophical issues. For example, philosophers distinguish between contingent and necessary truths. The proposition Kramer has red roses in his garden is a contingent proposition. The proposition might be true or it might be false, depending on whether or not Kramer has a garden containing some red roses. By contrast, the proposition 5 times 5 equals 25 is a necessarily true proposition. It must be true, it cannot be false. The proposition 5 times 5 equals 21 and Kramer is a merit bachelor are necessarily false. They cannot be true. They are contradictions and thus logically false. As we'll see, the doctrine of possible worlds can help us grasp this distinction. A warning: some students may find this material quite difficult. It really isn't, but any new way of talking or thinking about things can seem difficult at first. Master the definitions. Think about what I say and remember that much of this material is common sense. Once you understand what is going on and what the terms mean, the language of possible worlds will be a new way of thinking and talking about things that we are familiar with. But what is a proposition? Many philosophers distinguish between sentences and propositions. A sentence is some combination of words in a particular language. If a sentence has meaning, its meaning is said to be the proposition expressed by the sentence. Consider an example, the following sentence. 1. John is the husband of Mary. And 2. Mary is the wife of John. It is clear that 1 and 2 are different sentences that nonetheless refer to the same state of affairs. The different sentences have the same meaning and thus express the same proposition. The same result can follow when one reflects on the sentence of John is the husband of Mary and a sentence in French or German that refers to the same state of affairs and thus expresses the same proposition. But what is a state of affair? While it may not be possible to define the term state of affairs, it is possible to give examples. For every proposition, a meaningful sentence that is true or false, there is a corresponding state of affairs. In the following list of examples, the proposition is in the left-hand column, and the corresponding state of affairs is on the right hand. Proposition: Neil Armstrong was the first to land on the moon on July 21st, 1969. State of affairs: Neil Armstrong was landing on the moon on July 21st, 1969. When a proposition is true, we say that the corresponding state of affairs obtains. When a proposition is false, we say that the corresponding state of affairs does not obtain. Therefore, if we consider the false proposition that I landed on the moon on July 21st, 1969, the corresponding state of affairs that I was landing on the moon on July 21st, 1969 does not obtain. There is a simple way to turn any properly formulated proposition into a state of affairs. First, using as an example, take the subject of the proposition, land, and make it possessive, and then turn the verb into a gerund. Gerund meaning a word ending with ing that is made from a verb and that is used as a noun in the same sentence. when the verb in a proposition is land and the corresponding gerund is landing. Many philosophers believe that propositions and state of affairs are eternal and unchanging entities. Before you throw the book at someone, stop and reflect for a moment about the systems of Plato and Augustine, who believe in the existence of unchanging and eternal universals. According to Plato and Augustine, the properties of truth and goodness have always existed and can never change. Did you find Platonism that difficult to understand? All that's required here is that you add a few more things to the earlier list of eternal entities, in this case, propositions and state of affairs. If P is a proposition, then P has always existed. Moreover, if P is true, then it's always been true. The claim that propositions as distinct from sentences are eternally true or false entities seems contradicted by the proposition that contain references of time and place. Consider the sentence, I am now typing. At the moment the sentence is true, but it is obviously ceases to be true the moment I lift my finger from the keyboard and turn off the computer. Since the statement under consideration is sometimes true and usually false, how can one seriously maintain that propositions are eternally true? The answer lies in the fact that the example, I am now typing, is too poorly framed to serve as the real proposition in question. The doctrine that propositions are eternally true requires any sentence that is in effect open because of some reference to time or place to be closed. This can be done by eliminating tense verbs and making explicit any relevant information that may only be implied in the original. Because my original sentence that I am now typing contains a reference to time, the word now, it is an open statement. In order to approximate the proposition we need, it is necessary to remove any reference to time or place in the verb and then close the sentence by making explicit a reference to the precise time and place. And so we get to something like this. I am typing at 2:53 p.m. on May 16th, 2022 in my house in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. If this proposition is true on May 16th, 2022 and that it is, then the proposition is eternally true, has always been true. How can that be so? Some might ask. Consider the true proposition like 2 plus 3 equals 5, and the square of the hypotenuse of a right-angled triangle is equal to the sum of the squares of two sides. These two propositions have always been true, I contend. When I am asked how the last two propositions can be eternally true, all I need is to point out that in the worldview I hold and defend in this video, all true propositions subsist in the mind of God. Hearken back to Augustine's conviction that all of Plato's forms are eternal ideas in the mind of God. If there is a respectable claim, then why should there be any greater problem in believing that properly framed propositions are eternal truth in the mind of God? Furthermore, corresponding to the properly formulated proposition about me typing is the following state of affairs. I was typing at 2:53 p.m. on May 16, 2022 in my house in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. If the corresponding proposition is eternally true, why is there any further problem in believing that the corresponding state of affairs is also an eternal entity? Another warning. I understand how strange this can seem the first time one encounters it, since a solid grasp of everything thus far is essential to understand what comes next. Let me suggest that the listener turn to the beginning of this video series and listen to this point. If you do this, place a check at this point and reward yourself with your favorite snack, possibly a donut and a cup of coffee. When you have finished, write on a piece of paper a properly formulated proposition that tenselessly describe what you had just did, and then write the corresponding state of affairs. Don't allow the fact that the proposition and state of affairs you have just recorded are eternally true to shock you. Of course, this will be the case only if you did this brief assignment correctly. All this will mean is that God has always known that you would do what you just did at this time and place.